time is 10:21. We are going back on the record. This is take 2 of the videotape deposition of Bill Gates.
What were the primary goals that you personally had, Mr. Gates, in terms of getting Apple to agree to things?
Objection. Can you be just a bit more specific on that?
Sure. In the period of 1996 forward, after you concluded that Java, or as you put it, the Java runtime threat and Netscape were competitive threats to Microsoft. What were your goals in terms of dealing with Apple? What were you trying to get Apple to agree to do for Microsoft?
Well, the main reasons we were having discussions with Apple in this 97 period was that they had asserted that various patents that they had applied to various Microsoft products. And so our primary focus in discussing an agreement with them was to conclude a patent cross-license of some kind.
I want to be sure that the question and answer are meeting. I asked for a period of 1996 to the present. You answered about 1997. Were your goals in 1996 or after 1997 any different than the goals that you just described in dealing with Apple?
There's only one agreement with Apple, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. Do you understand the word goals or objectives?
You talked about agreeing with Apple. There's only one agreement with Apple that I know about that we're discussing, and that was one that was concluded in, I think, late July or early August 1997. And there's no other agreement that I know was even discussed or considered.
Okay. Let me ask you to look at a document previously marked as Government Exhibit 369. Thank you. The second item on the first page of this exhibit purports to be an email from you dated June 23, 1996 to Paul Moritz and Brad Silverberg with copies to Messrs. Higgins, Bradford, Waldman, and Ludwig on the subject of, quote, Apple meeting, close quote. Did you send this email, Mr. Gates, on or about June 23, 1996?
I don't remember it specifically, but I don't have any reason to doubt that I did.
In the second paragraph, you say, quote, I have 2 key goals in investing in the Apple relationship. 1, maintain our application share on the platform, and 2, see if we can get them to embrace Internet Explorer in some way, close quote. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Does that refresh your recollection as to what your 2 key goals were in connection with Apple in June of 1996?
Well, first of all, June of 1996 is not in the time frame that your previous question related to. And certainly in the email to this group, I'm not talking about the patent thing, but believe me, it was our top goal in thinking about Apple for many, many years because of their assertions.
My time frame in my question, sir, was time frame beginning in 1996 when you began to view Netscape or the Java runtime threat as a competitive threat to Microsoft.
And that was after June of 1996.
Is it your testimony that in June of 1996 you did not consider Netscape to be a competitive threat to Microsoft?
Netscape was a competitor, but in terms of Java and all the runtime related issues, we didn't have a clear view of that at all.
So that, I want to be sure I've got your testimony accurately. It is your testimony that in June of 1996 you considered Netscape to be a competitive threat, but you did not consider Java or Java runtime to be a competitive threat. Is that your testimony?
We considered Netscape to be a competitor, and I told you earlier that until late 96 we were unclear about our position on various Java runtime things and what other companies were doing and what that meant for us competitively.
Do you agree that in June of 1996, the two key goals that you had in terms of the Apple relationship were, quote, one, maintain our applications share on the platform, and two, see if you could get Apple to embrace Internet Explorer in some way?
No.
Do you have any explanation for why you would have written to Mr. Moritz and Mr. Silverberg on June 23, 1996, that those were your two key goals in the Apple relationship?
No, they weren't involved in the patent issue at all. So when I write to them, I'm focused on the issues that relate to them. I do mention patents in here, but that certainly was the primary goal at this time and in subsequent times.
Let me be clear. When you write to Mr. Moritz and Mr. Silverberg, you talk about patents, do you not, sir?
Where do you see that?
Well, did you talk about patents?
Do you want me to read the entire mail?
Have you read it enough to know whether you talk about patents?
I saw the word patent in one place. If I read the whole thing, I can find out if it's in other places as well.
You do talk about patent cross-license, do you not, in this memo? And if you want to look at the last page, 5 lines from the bottom.
Yeah, they weren't involved in the patent issues at all. So it looks like in this mail I just mentioned that in a summary part. But it was our top goal in our discussions with Apple.
Now, when you write to Mr. Moritz and Mr. Silverberg, you don't describe that as your top goal. In fact, you don't even describe it as one of your 2 or 3 key goals. Correct, sir?
This piece of email doesn't talk about the patent goal as the top goal. Most likely that's because the people copied on the mail don't have a thing to do with it, and I wouldn't distract them with it.
I want to be sure I have your testimony correct. In June of 1996, what was Paul Moritz's title?
He was involved in product development activities.
He was involved in product development activities. What was his title?
I don't know. Systems?
Systems?
Mm-hmm.
Did he have a title that went with that?
Senior Vice President Systems? I don't
Senior
know.
Vice President Systems. I see. Did Mr. Silverberg have a position in June of 1996?
He worked for Mr. Moritz.
Did he have a title?
I don't know what his title was at the time. He would have been an officer of some kind.
An officer of some kind. So you're writing a memo to Paul Moritz, a senior vice president, and Brad Silverberg, an officer of some kind, and you're sending copies to 4 other people on the subject of the Apple meeting. And you say, I have 2 key goals in investing in the Apple relationship.
That's quite distinct than any goals I might have for a deal with Apple. It says, I have 2 key goals in investing in the Apple relationship. Not, I have 2 key goals for a deal with Apple.
Well, sir, at the bottom you say what you propose in terms of a deal, and you talk about what Apple will get out of the deal and what Microsoft will get out of the deal. Correct, sir?
Do you want me to read you the email? I mean, I don't know anything more than just what it says in the email. I'm glad to read it to you.
Well, sir, does it say at the bottom of the email that you are proposing something with Apple, and you are identifying what Apple would get under your proposed deal and what Microsoft would get under your proposed deal?
Yeah, that's at the bottom of the email.
In fact, the bottom of the email, talking about a proposed Apple-Microsoft deal, you say, quote, the deal would look like this. And then you've got a column Apple gets and a column Microsoft gets and a column both get. Right, sir?
I'm reading that.
Okay. Now, in this email of a page or a page and a half, in which you are proposing this deal, you describe your two key goals as maintaining Microsoft's applications share on the platform and getting Apple to embrace Internet Explorer.
Now,
Correct, sir?
that's wrong.
That's wrong, okay?
The word deal and the word relationship are not the same word. This says I have two key goals in investing in the Apple relationship. This down here is an agreement which I thought we could reach with Apple.
And is it your testimony here today under oath that your two key goals in investing in the Apple relationship, which you mentioned at the second paragraph of this email, is different than your two key goals in the proposed deal that you describe 5 paragraphs later?
I don't see anything in here about the key goals, two key goals in the deal. I've told you that I'm certain that my primary goal in any deal was the patent cross-license.
Mr. Gates, my question is whether it is your testimony today here under oath that when you talk about your two key goals in investing in the Apple relationship in the second paragraph of this email, that is different than what your key goals were in the deal that you proposed 5 paragraphs later.
That's right. Investing in the
testimony.
relationship is different than the deal.
Now, you don't tell Mr. Moritz or Mr. Silverberg that your goals for investing in the Apple relationship are different than your goals in the proposed deal, do you, sir?
But the goals in the deal are quite different. So obviously they would have known they were quite different.
Well, sir, you say the goals and the deal are quite different. One of your two key goals that you talk about in your in your second paragraph is to get Apple to embrace Internet Explorer in some way. And the very first thing under what Microsoft gets in your proposed deal is, quote, Apple endorses Microsoft Internet Explorer technology. You see that, sir?
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that refresh your recollection that the deal that you were proposing had some relationship to the two key goals that you were identifying?
Some relationship, yes, but they aren't the same thing at all.
All right, sir. Did you ever prepare any email to anyone Mr. Moritz or Mr. Silverberg or anyone in which you said that your primary goal in an Apple deal was obtaining a cross-license?
I don't remember a specific piece of email, but I'm sure I did with at least Mr. Maffei and Mr. Moritz.
You were sure that you sent them email saying that?
I'm sure I communicated it to them in some way.
Do you believe you sent them anything in writing or an email?
I think it's likely, but I don't remember a specific document.
Okay. You certainly haven't seen any such a document in being prepared for your deposition. Is that fair?
You're not seeking to intrude on the attorney.
No, I just wanted to know if he's seen any such document. This document that he says he thinks exists that wasn't produced to us in document production, I just want to see if he's ever seen it, if he recalls ever seeing it, now or at any other time.
I didn't say anything about what may or may not exist at this point. I said that I'm sure I communicated to Mr. Moritz and Mr. Maffei that our primary goal in doing the deal with Apple was the patent cross-license.
And I had thought, and perhaps I misunderstood, I had thought that you had said that you believed that you'd actually communicated that not merely orally, but by email or in writing.
I think it's likely that I communicated it in email.
And if you'd communicated an email, would that email have been preserved?
Not necessarily.
A lot of these emails were preserved, because we now have copies of them, right?
That's right.
How did Microsoft decide what emails would be preserved and what emails would not be preserved?
Individuals get email into their mailbox and they decide.
Do you have any explanation as to why people would have decided to keep the email that described your two key goals in the Apple relationship as being what they are stated to be here, and not have preserved your email that you say you sent, saying that you had a primary goal of a cross-license?
Objection.
You're
Lack of foundation. Hold it. Objection. Now, those facts are not established. There could be 100 emails that talk about a patent cross-license. You may have them, or you may not have them. They may not have been called for. There's a range of possibilities.
No.
That question is unfair, and I object.
Okay, you've made your objection. The witness will now answer the question.
Let's have it read back.
And if you come up with those 100 emails, we will read them with interest. I don't think you're going to. And you don't think you're going to either.
I disagree with that.
Okay? I'll restate the question to just be absolutely certain that it's a fair question, Mr. Gates. If it were the case that neither your counsel nor myself, after diligent search, can find an email that says your primary goal in dealing with Apple was a patent cross-license, do you have any explanation as to why that email that you say you think exists would not have been saved, whereas the email that described one of your two key goals as getting Apple to embrace Internet Explorer was preserved?
Objection. It's not a sensible question. You're asked a hypothetical. How can the witness explain what the facts might be in your hypothetical?
He's not being asked to explain what the facts are in the hypothetical. I think that's clear. If the witness tells me he cannot answer the question, he can do so. We will go on and take that up like everything else we're going to take up at a subsequent time.
Well, when you say dealing with Apple, there were a lot of things we were dealing with Apple on. I've told you in terms of the deal that I was involved in discussing in '96 and with under another management Apple in '97, There's no doubt the primary goal was the patent cross-license.
And by the primary goal, what you mean is the primary goal that you, Mr. Gates, had. Is that correct?
I don't think I'm the only one who had it, but certainly, yes, that was the primary goal of myself and for the company.
And when you said in your June 23, 1996 email, quote, I have two key goals in investing in the Apple relationship, close quote, you were talking about yourself personally? Is that correct?
Yeah, when I say investing in the Apple relationship, that means spending time with Apple and growing the relationship.
And when in describing the deal 5 paragraphs later, the very first thing that Microsoft gets is, quote, Apple endorses Microsoft Internet Explorer technology, close quote. Did that indicate to you that that was an important part of what you were getting in terms of the deal?
No such deal was ever struck, so I'm not sure what you're saying.
Was that an important part of the deal that you were trying to get, sir?
We never got as far as trying to get that deal, unfortunately.
You never got as far as trying to get that deal? Is that what
No.
you're saying?
No, well, in this time frame, Gil Emilio's total focus was on his new OS strategy, and so what I outlined here, we never got them to consider.
Well, sir, your email begins, last Tuesday night, I went down to address the top Apple executives. Correct, sir?
That's right.
And down at the bottom, when you're introducing the deal, you say, quote, I proposed. Now, you're referring to what you proposed to the Apple top executives, are you not, sir?
Yes?
Okay. And what you proposed was, quote, the deal that you then describe at the bottom of the first page and the top of the second page. Correct, sir?
That's right.
And that was a deal that you proposed the Tuesday night before June 23, 1996, to what you describe as the top Apple executive. Correct, sir?
I'd put forward some of those points.
Well, you put them forward and you describe them as proposing a deal. Correct, sir?
That's how I describe it here, yes.
All right, sir. Now, you said that the deal that you were talking about never got done. Did you ever get Apple to endorse Microsoft Internet Explorer technology?
You're trying to just read part of that?
What I'm doing is I'm asking a question right now, sir. I'm asking whether in 1996 or otherwise, at any time, did you get Apple to endorse Microsoft Internet Explorer technology?
Well, you can get a copy of the agreement we reached with Apple and decide if in reading that you think it meets that criteria or not.
Sir, I'm asking you as the Chief Executive Officer of Microsoft. I'm asking you whether you believe that you achieved that objective.
We did not get some exclusive endorsement. We did get there's some part of the deal that has to do with Internet Explorer technology.
Do you know what that part of the deal is?
Not really. It has something to do with they'll at least ship it along with other browsers.
Does the deal prohibit them from shipping Netscape's browser without also shipping Internet Explorer?
I'd have to look at the deal to understand.
It is your testimony sitting here today under oath that you simply don't know one way or the other whether Apple is today free to ship Netscape's browser without also shipping Internet Explorer?
That's right.
When you identify things as key goals, do you typically tend to follow up and see to what extent those goals have been achieved?
In a very general sense, yes.
Did you ever follow up to see whether one of the two key goals that you identify in your 1996 email to Mr. Moritz and Mr. Silverberg and others of getting Apple to embrace internet technology in some way had been achieved?
Well, certainly what I said here, I have two goals in investing in the Apple relationship. Those weren't achieved because the investments I made were with Gil Amelio, who was fired from Apple very soon thereafter.
Was there something about Mr. Amelio getting fired that changed what your goals were for the Apple relationship?
I said I have two key goals in investing in the Apple relationship. The form that investment took was spending time with Gil Amelio. That turned out to be wasted time because he was fired from Apple rather abruptly within about 8 months of this.
When he was fired, did that change what goals you had for the Apple relationship, Mr. Gates?
It was basically a complete restart because we had to understand what the new management, what they were going to do with Apple and where they were going.
Did your goals change?
Goals for what? For
The
investing
Apple
in the relationship?
You say in this email that you have two key goals for investing in the Apple relationship.
In
one of them-
investing in the Apple relationship.
One of them is to get Apple to embrace internet technology in some way. What I'm asking you is whether that changed after this person got fired.
We reevaluated all of our thoughts about working with Apple based on what the new management was going to do, where they were going to target the machines, what they were going to do with their machines. Since they continued to say that we were in violation of their patents, it continued to be our top goal to get some type of patent cross license.
Would you read the question back, please?
One of them is to get Apple to embrace internet technology in some way. What I'm asking you is whether that changed after the person got fired.
Better read the whole question and then again reincorporate it so that it's clear from the record.
You say in this email you have two key goals for investing in the Apple relationship. One is investing in the Apple relationship. Question. One of them is to get Apple to embrace internet technology in some way. What I'm asking you is whether that changed after the person got fired.
You keep, either intentionally or unintentionally, trying to confuse my goals for investing in the relationship with the goals we had overall for various dealings with Apple. Certainly the goals I had for investing in the relationship, that I had to start over and rethink because the investment was to spend time with the CEO who had been fired.
Mr. Gates, neither in this email nor in any other document that either of us is aware of, do you make that distinction that you're making now, correct?
Objection.
Do you understand the question I'm asking you?
This document does not say that my goals for dealing with, does not state my goals for dealing with Apple up here. It states my goals in investing in the Apple relationship. So there's a clear distinction right there in that document.
Mr. Gates, this document deals with a proposed deal that you made to top Apple executive.
And that's only one part of what's in the document. There's a part where it talks about, you never mentioned it, but the first goal is maintain our application share on the platform. That's something I'm doing in investing in the Apple relationship. And that's not related to the deal that's given, the proposed deal that's discussed below in the email. So those are clearly two separate things. Related but separate.
What I think I've done is I think I have mentioned the first goal a number of times.
I don't think so.
I think it's been read about 3 times in the record, and the record will show it.
Okay. That's a point of disagreement.
Okay.
But not an important one.
Exactly the point that I was making, which is why the witness makes those kind of statements.
It took 2 to tango just there.
Yes, it did.
It did, okay.
It did. And it actually took 4 of us, 3 on that side of the table and me. My question, Mr. Gates, has to do with what your goals were, what your stated goals were. Now, you say here, I have 2 key goals in investing in the Apple relationship, one of which was to get Apple to embrace Internet Explorer technology in some way. Did that continue to be a goal that you had after 1996?